Hello everyone, I'm doing a video here when we are factorizing cubic functions. I have done another video where I've factorized cubic function using a different method. So here I'm going to use another method. They call it synthetic method. I think it's a little bit easier. So your first step is to find a factor. You use your calculator. Then you substitute 1. Where there is x, you put 1. And then you see if you get 0. You won't get 0 for this function. You substitute -1. You substitute 2, you substitute -2. When you substitute 3, that's where you get your 0. You don't have to write this. I'm just writing it so that I explain it better to you. So when there is x, I'm going to write 3. So it's going to be 3 to the power 3 minus 3. And then where there is x, I put 3 squared minus 9. Then I put 3 plus 27. You don't write that. You punch it in your calculator. Then when you punch it in your calculator, you get a 0. So it means 3 is a factor of this function. So let me show you what to do with it. Right, you should draw a table like this with 4 columns and 3 rows, right? And then here you write factor 3. I write it here. And then here you're going to write the coefficient of your x cubed, x squared, x, and the constant. So the coefficient of x cubed, the number that goes with x cubed is 1. You only write the coefficient. You don't write the coefficient of x squared. It's -3. You don't write the x squared. Then the coefficient of x is -9, and your constant is 27. So this is how you start it. You write the factor outside, and then you write the coefficient on the first block. Then your next step, you block this block. You don't write anything on it. And then you take whatever coefficient you have here, you write it here. Then you say that factor that you got multiplied by 1. And then your answer you write here. It will be 3. And then you subtract this column. -3 and 3 will give you 0. Then factor multiplied by 0, it's 0. -9 plus 0, it's -9. So every time you multiply with whatever you have at the bottom, you multiply the 3 and the -9, you'll get a -27. -27 minus 27, it's 0. This is one sign that you are correct. The last column must always be 0. If it's not 0, you've made a mistake somewhere. You must go back and check. Our function is h at x is equals to, then you write that as a factor first. It's x, you change the sign. If it's positive, you make it negative. If it's negative, so your first bracket is x minus 3. Because the factor was positive, we write it as minus. And then our next bracket, these are the coefficient of the next bracket. This one is for x squared. So it's 1x squared. You don't have to write the 1. So it's x squared plus, do you see here, I have a 0. So it means I will not have, if I had a number, maybe a 1, it will be 1x, or a 2, it will be a 2x. But because I have a 0, I'll just write it. You don't have to write it in an exam. I just write it to show you so that you can understand better. And then the last term, it's always the constant. It doesn't have x, -9. So in this bracket, you always have a quadratic one. You remember we started with a cubic one. Then this bracket, when you multiply it here, you'll get that cubic function. But you must remember that this one is quadratic. So here it's x -3. I'm just writing it and taking out the 0. So it's x squared minus 9. This is what you should have. You don't need to write that. I was just making you to understand. You remember we were saying we are factorizing the cubic function. And remember, when you get a question where you're factorizing cubic function, you must never use a quadratic formula. This is not a quadratic function, it's cubic. So the quadratic formula doesn't work. You have to find a way of solving the cubic function. So if we have that, now, because we are factorizing, we're going to say the whole function equals to 0. Okay, this is our function we said equals to 0. Here you have a quadratic one, but this one is different of 2 squares. So if you had a quadratic one, you'll factorize it. And if you can't factorize, then you can use a quadratic formula here, because it will be a quadratic function in this bracket. But this is difference of 2 squares. It's not different, it's not difficult. minus 3. You write a perfect square for that one. This is a perfect square, so you write a square root, it's x, and then a square root of 9 is 3, and then you change the sign. These two brackets are the same. We do have a video that explains difference of two squares in our video, in our channel as well. So now I want you to notice something. Do you see this factor is the same? They've written the same. You have factorized and got the same factor twice. If you were asked to draw this function, this will be your turning point. It means our function will have 2 x-intercepts, not 3. And this function will be the turning point, right? So your intercept will be x is equals to 3 or x is equals to minus 3. You don't have to write the x is equals to 3 twice. If the term is the same, the bracket is the same, you can only write once. And remember, if you get something like that, it means this will be your turning point and your intercept. So your graph will turn on that point. So this is how you factorize quadratic function. Okay, the coordinates, you write them. The x coordinate is 3 and the y coordinate is 0. And for the other one, the x coordinate is minus 3 and the y coordinate is 0. So this is how you write the coordinates, and this is how you want to plot them on your graph if the question asks you to plot on the graph. So this is the end of our lesson. Thank you for watching.